there was no countdown, but I see us live.
Really? And I don't see the live. Okay, yeah, I see it now. Hold on. All right. What up, everyone? It's Led Black and Octavio Blanco for another episode of Black and Blanco on this beautiful Sunday, June 28th. We got a lot of things to talk about today. I just want to shout out my youngest daughter, Soraya, who has a birthday today. She turns 20. So my little girl is no longer a little girl. Shout out to everyone having birthdays in this beautiful June. My brother Octavio, man, talk to me, man. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I just changed the layout so that hopefully people won't be seeing the split screen. Sorry about that. That's not a that's an Instagram thing and interface thing. But now we're all good. I'm doing well. This is the Sunday after just a wild week. I mean, or really more like a wild 2 weeks. Yo, like the Knicks win feels like it was a year ago already. It was there's been so much going on because just this week we saw this historic win by Darializa Avila Chevalier in the district. So she should be headed to Congress, and then the rent was frozen, right? Like we had a rent freeze for anybody for the in rent stabilized apartments for the next 2 years. Rent has been frozen, and then we had this terrible earthquake in Venezuela, and that's where I'd like to start is with the earthquake. I've been watching videos and it's been terrible. So I don't know. How are you doing? What's new with you? Like
No,
before we get started.
let's get into it, man. This earthquake is we had a political earthquake, and now we have a real earthquake in Venezuela. And I think it was more than one earthquake. It was two, I think, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
it was back to back two
But,
earthquakes,
but
seven
yeah, and
point
I've
five
seen
and 7.6 or something like that.
and a country that's still going through so much, right? They recently had like the weirdest fucking abduction of their president, whether you like him or not. Like that's not what we're talking about here, but as a violation of sovereignty. And that I'm sure they're still kind of getting used to that. And then you have this earthquake, which is horrible. But I think you have some places right now where people uptown could help, right? I think it's a place up in Inwood.
Yeah. I just want to say that there's a place in Inwood called Isla Bonita, which I had not been to, but I looked at their website. It looks like a pretty nice place. Isla Bonita. Let me just put up a video that's been making the rounds on Instagram. This was shared by our brother Chris Espinoza. Um, Got some music in the background. This is the website for Isla Bonita. One thing you should know is
Yeah, we can't hear you with the music, so I think we should get rid of this video.
all right. All right, sorry about that, folks, that you couldn't hear me. But anyway, the point being was Isla Bonita is in Inwood. I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can see the address and everything.
Yeah, it's
Um,
3950 10th Avenue, Suite
yeah,
B. And drop off time is
3950.
between 5 and 10 for the month
Yeah,
of July.
5 and 10. So if you're going to be if you're interested in actually dropping off physical items, um, that's where in a local spot that you can do it. So go there. It's through the end of July, so there's going to be, time, and you can drop off items numerous times through the end of July. There's also, a lot of.
Hold on, Octavio.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just talk about what they're looking for. So they're looking for canned foods, clothes, first aid kits, first necessities, hygiene, personal care items, baby formula, and diapers. So, I know we all have some stuff that's what we do as a community. We look out for each other. I also want to say that, there's definitely like a close bond between Venezuelans and Dominicans. While Venezuelans have been fleeing Venezuela for years now, a lot of them end up in Dominican Republic. And so there's a real big bond between the Venezuelan community and the Dominican community. So, my heart goes out to them. And please
if I'm not mistaken, the first international rescue efforts in Venezuela were Dominicans. It was from the Dominican Republic, the first people on the ground from international to try to start digging people out. Led, can you go through what they're asking for again, just so people know? I mean, this is a country that, for example, when people in Venezuela go to the hospital, right, to get it, this is pre-earthquake, before the earthquake. Don't forget, Venezuela is a poor, has been really ravaged by sanctions from the United States and other things. So it's been dealing with poverty for a long time. When people go to hospital in Venezuela to get surgery, generally, unless they have to bring all the stuff that the doctors would need, the tubings, the bandages, the antiseptics, because the hospitals don't have enough of that. So this is even before the earthquake. So imagine how bad things are now. So Led, if you can go through that list of things that Venezuelans
they're
need.
looking for canned foods, non-perishable items, clothes for all ages, first aid kits and medical supplies, first necessities, which is like hygiene and personal care items, baby formula and baby food, and diapers, babies and adult too. If you have those, please help out.
Yeah, and if you're local to Uptown, there's a lot of places in Queens, obviously, because there's a lot of Venezuelans in Queens. But in Uptown, the one place that I've seen that is actually collecting goods is called Isla Bonita. That's on 10th Avenue and 207th Street. Go there and donate some stuff that they need. Another way to take part is to donate money. We need money. They need money. So I know for a fact that Gustavo Dudamel, the now director, conductor of the New York Philharmonic, he is started a charity through the United Nations. I'm putting it up on the screen here. Take a screenshot of this if you can. I'm gonna read it out so you guys can read it. Let me make sure that it goes back up. It's www.every.org/UNDP/F/helping Venezuelan communities. It's up on the screen right now. That's Gustavo Dudamel's effort. Gustavo Dudamel is a Venezuelan. He now lives in New York City. Putting it up again. He's working with the United Nations, and I think that he says that once things are settled in Venezuela, he's going to do a big charity concert there. To fundraise, and I think there's something like 40,000 Venezuelans that are still missing. It's a number that I've seen floating around. Not sure how accurate though it was. Numbers of the dead and the injured are, from the video that I've seen of the buildings that just pancaked on top of each other, it seems very low. I think the last number was something around the 1,400 people who are confirmed, dead. But there's like a lot of pain, and people are going through it in Venezuela.
Yeah. I also want to mention one more thing, Octavio. The People's Forum, which is another organization that I respect and have a lot of love for. That also you could donate through them as well, and that's peoplesforum.org/VZ relief. So if you want to do it, there's another way to donate because People's Forum is doing some good work here and internationally.
Tell me, what's People's Forum?
People's Forum is like they do a lot of international work, cultural work, informing people. And I think it's more of a socialist organization. It's been around for a long time. My good friend Claudia is involved with it as well. So I really fuck with them.
And can you repeat that?
Sure.
I'm gonna put it on the
sure.
screen.
It's peoplesforum.org/VZ relief.
/VZ relief.
Yep.
All right, there we go. peoplesforum.org /VZ relief. That's another place where you can make charitable contributions. Of course, World Central Kitchen is on the ground, feeding the people. This is an organization that goes wherever they're needed. Chef Jose Andres and his team are on the ground feeding people. So I think that I'm going to put that up. It's another long address, wck.org /news /Caracas Venezuela earthquakes. That's where you can see what they're doing and also make charitable contribution. We've got Ricky Martin out of Puerto Rico, heartbroken, putting it together too, where he's got some places for people who want to contribute through his team. Has put up a couple of charitable organizations that he backs. You can go to rickymartinmusic.com/Venezuela. That's where he has put up some of the things that for people to go to. And there's another one called Direct Relief. Direct Relief is also on the ground. What's good about Direct Relief is that they work, as their name implies, they work directly with people on the ground, first responders and local governments, to bring them, like I said, medical and things like that, medical equipment, medicine, and also organizing people for where they're going. I will say one final thing about people who want to do charitable contributions. Everything that we've shared here is verified, but there's a lot of people out there, and sometimes people don't have the best intentions. They take advantage of these disasters to scam folks. So what I would recommend is that folks go to charitynavigator.org. It's up on the screen right now. And they have a page called Discover Charities, where to give Venezuela earthquake relief. That's a charity list. Now, Charity Navigator is an organization that all they do is vet charitable organizations. As far as I know, they're one of the best, if not the best, guide, so that you can know whether or not your money is going to the people in need. Because it's not just about scams. Sometimes charities take a lot of donations, but only a piece of it goes to the actual people in need. So you gotta, if you really want your money to be helping the people in need and not just like paying executives, things like that, Charity Navigator gives you a breakdown of where the money goes to make sure that your cash that you're donating is actually going to help the people in need rather than, other things. So
and I want to say something too about like a larger point about this tragedy in Venezuela. That I think that it's going undernoticed and underreported is that it's a new era in Latin America. It's maybe a new era, maybe a return to an old era. That that we're back, we're in a place where America is fully, once again, like trying to take control of the whole region, of the whole shebang, right? And particularly for Venezuela, right? Venezuela for since Chavez, was flush with Cuban doctors, right? That will be so helpful right now on the ground, helping the Venezuelan people, right? Like they've done international missions around the world, and they don't have those doctors anymore. So I think it's one of those things that, like, America forced that condition on Venezuela, and now those doctors that could have been very helpful are gone. And I'm also going to talk about an earthquake that happened in Colombia, but it wasn't an earthquake. There was a right-wing president installed in Colombia, right? A president that laughs and makes jokes about strapping cats with fireworks to see them blow up, see if they could fly. So I just feel like, right now there's the sword of the Americas, which is a bunch of right-wing governments. Unfortunately, the government
the shield of the Americas.
The shield, but it's also acting as like a sword, right?
Yeah.
But Dominican Republic is a card-carrying member and prominent member of that. And again, it's sad what's happening. The left is only, I think, Brazil and Mexico left. And when you have no one else to help you, we're gonna feel it. And I think we're starting to see the beginnings of this new world order taking shape, and it's not pretty. And I think America, alongside its greatest ally, is buying up the continent one by one and installing leaders one by one. And I think in my country, the Dominican Republic, I think they're doing the same. I like to talk about Alofoke a lot, and during our last, we did the live last week. This week, I talked about my idea that I came as we were talking, which was Trujillo 2.0 and the coming right-wing revolution in the Dominican Republic. And I think, I'm gonna make a prediction right here. Before 2028, Alofoke will either be assassinated or he will become president of the United States. I mean, president of the Dominican Republic, excuse me. But very much like he's like a Trump figure. And I think people are very much don't know who he is. And again, I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I think that this is an omen of where we're headed, the disaster that's coming for Latin America.
The right word swing in Latin America is it's scary. It's also in certain respects it's not a surprise. When our countries have violence, with drug dealers and cartels running wild, you see it in Peru, you see it in Colombia, and less so in Colombia. The crime had sort of fallen there, subsided, but still there's a lot of fear that is it's always on people's minds. So that's sort of par for the course in these in places that are suffering from these kinds of issues. But then also in all of these countries we've seen a rise of Christianity, and that always comes with right wing tendencies. And the Trump administration has a strong connection with what would I call the white nationalist Christians here in the United States. But these Christians are also looking to take over in our Latin American countries, which traditionally have been Catholic, but more recently have gone the way of Christianity, and they're really pushing their religious agenda and their right-wing political agenda.
No, go ahead. I just want to also say that I agree with you 100%. But it's not like by happenstance, right?
No, not at all.
In Latin America, you had the growth of liberation theology, right? Where people like, the Catholic priests on the ground were so moved by the suffering they saw of the poor that their ideology changed, right? And that liberation theology was not acceptable to the powers that be. And what I'm trying to say is that the growth of right-wing Christian is not just in Latin America, but all over the world, is not by mistake. It's orchestrated from here, it's funded from here, and it has a political purpose. That's it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Absolutely. That's people don't. I don't think that aspect of it has been reported enough. Just the focus that the right-wing Christian movement in the United States has had in terms of establishing itself, and not just establishing itself, but becoming the go-to religion in Latin America, yes, and then also in the rest of the world, as you say. Like, it's a real thing, and it's something that it's been in the works for decades. It's not a new thing, and it carries with it. It's not apolitical. Everything is political, and this is also political. This is the way that right-wing movements in our countries are getting more and more funding and more visibility, is because of these right-wing Christian churches becoming established, and like everything else, the money flows through them, the people come and they grow to depend on them, and their worldview becomes the way of the country. It's a concerning state of affairs in all of these nations that are suffering so much. When you take the case of Venezuela, for example, like I was saying, where even before this earthquake, it was difficult for people to get health care. Imagine how difficult it is now. And you've got a lot of money flowing into Venezuela. So that's why I want to, make sure that people, before that they donate their money, that they look at who's handling the money, go to Charity Navigator, and do just a little bit of research before you do your donation, because it's very, very important. I'm all for people helping. Alofoke apparently is also helping, but he has very dastardly plans, I think, very right-wing plans, and we got to make sure that we're careful where the money is being given.
And you brought up Alofoke back, so I gotta say something about that. That, like, so he basically dropped a new video this week, right? Like, no one expected it, but it was him rapping a song. I'm not gonna lie, the song actually was kind of catchy. I can't fuck with him, but the song was catchy. but within the video, you see him in a picture of him and Trump together in a golf course. So he's not hiding. You know what I mean? He's saying it in your face. And again, being Dominican, being tied to the island, you see the popularity of this man. Like, he is that popular. Like, the average Dominican is so disgusted, rightfully so, with the government, that they are looking to hand him the keys to the kingdom. And again, I think it will be a mistake, because it's not funny, I should say. It's very interesting that we spoke about this before, that, for most of its time as a country, at least the last century, we spent 70 years of the last century as a right-wing country, right? 30 under the brutal dictatorship of Trujillo, and then another 40 with Balaguer as president and kingmaker. You know what I mean? And it's only since the early 2000s that we've had, not a perfect democracy, a democracy with tons of issues, a democracy with a little clique on top that just steals, and then they replace the clique with a different party, and they steal, and that's horrible and it's not right. But we've had some sort of functioning democracy. The working poor in DR is always going to have gotten school forever, but there was no political violence there, in the last 30 years. I think, where we're headed, that might change. And I think that if someone like Alofoke is installed, it will quickly turn into a Bukele kind of situation. And I'll say that I'm not comparing Bukele and Alofoke. They are two different people. And I do not think that Alofoke has the level of organization and kind of thinking that Bukele does. Bukele is a dictator through and through. He seems, even though he's evil, I still think he's very intelligent. I think Alofoke is just evil and ambitious. He's not intelligent. So what we end up there could be even much worse. But again, I think that Dominican Republic has a thriving democracy, and well, not a thriving. It has a democracy that's functioning somewhat, but there's also a lot of money on the island, and I think it's not headed in the right direction right now, and I'm scared for my country.
Yeah, and I mean all these nations that are drifting right, because even in Colombia, the fact that he won was a very narrow win. It was like very, very narrow. I don't have the numbers, but it was very narrow. I would direct them to our country and see how that's working for us, because it hasn't been working for us. We've been into more wars. Our economy's in the gutter, and we're living in a kleptocracy. So for Latin Americans out there, we've dealt with that before. And if you really want to go back to kleptocracy and all that kind of thing, I worry for you. I worry for you. Before we go, I want to just go ahead and share these links one more time. I'm going to shrink them down because I noticed that they were a little bit big on the Instagram. So I'm going to do a short link. So first of all is the People's Forum. That's one place where folks can donate their money. That's peoplesforum.org. The next one is World Central Kitchen. I hope that you guys can see this. Might be. I hope that they're not on top of each other. That's WCK.
Yeah, they're kind of on top. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully they'll undo. So I'll just wait for each one of them to come off. The Ricky Martin place, which I'll show it right now, rickymartinmusic.com/Venezuela. That's another one where you guys can go to. Let's see here. Direct Relief. That's they're the ones that are doing a lot of work on the ground with the local organizations. Hopefully it won't.
And one of the things that come to mind as we talk about Venezuela, I started thinking about the Naomi Klein book that I read from a few years ago, The Shock Doctrine, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism. And it's like these disasters are tragedies for us and for the people living there, but these are beautiful opportunities for people with money and cash, and this is a beautiful way to steamroll their agenda. And I think we have to be ever careful of that, because I think that's what's coming. Venezuela is a huge country, has tons of petroleum, has tons of assets, and they've been sucking that country dry with sanctions for years. And now I think it's about fully taking more and more out of them.
that's why it's so important to really do your homework and do your check out where your money is going, um, and um, and make sure that your money is going where you actually need it, where it needs to go, rather than lining the pockets of people. I also wanted to say that we have a special guest today. He's not here yet. He's just texted me. He's going to be here in a second. Um, his name is Ed Morales. He's an author and a journalist, and he's going to be joining us to talk about the Darializa win and give us his perspective. He'll be on here very soon. I'm going to be getting him on here real soon. So go ahead, Led. I need to make sure that he's got
talking about Ed.
It.
I read that article and I shared it with you. I shared it with everyone I knew. I thought it was just a brilliant take on what happened. And it was also kind of an indictment on the people that allowed it to happen. I thought it was probably so far the best piece I've read on what happened. And I couldn't. It's funny you told me it was on Substack, but I couldn't find it. I only saw it on Facebook. I thought it was just it was just excellent. It's called "A Left Turn in Washington Heights." David Garlarza Santa, I guess, who posted it. Is that who posted it? But Ed Morales wrote it, right?
Yeah, Galarza ripped it and put it up on the.
And he posted so Ed Morales, But again, it was one of these pieces that just, very succinctly bust down what happened. Without the spin, without the bullshit. You did a in our last piece, in our last live, you talked about Errol Lewis. And I thought you were so on point talking about Errol Lewis. Because what you realize is like Errol Lewis couldn't fathom what happened on Tuesday to the political establishment because he is part of that political establishment. He's a mouthpiece for that political establishment. And it took all the time for us to kind of really see it, right? He acted so like, what are they doing? They don't want Israel. Like he sounded like, again, a very smart man who had tons of respect for, but he ended up being just a shill. You know what I mean? There was a piece also in the Amsterdam News who, have a lot of respect for, forgot the author, but it was another piece of bullshit, just trying to say Mamdani, betrayed Espaillat. And it's just kind of annoying. Even let me tell you, even Breaking Points, who I love the podcast. I like Crystal Ball, and I forgot the name of the guy on there who I respect as well. He said he was talking about Mamdani, in supporting Darializa and Claire Valdez and in reference to him, not supporting Espaillat, he referred to it as bloodthirsty and cutthroat. And I'm like, what? Bloodthirsty and cutthroat is supporting the Israeli regime while it commits a genocide. That's bloodthirsty and cutthroat. So, again, that's why I thought Ed Morales' piece was so important, because it cuts through the bullshit. It cuts through the programming and just really goes to the heart of the matter. How, not just Dominicans, Latinos, Black leadership in this city and in this country, has kind of sold us all out, right? They basically have just told the party line. Yeah. So whatever the Democratic leadership wants, that's what we're pushing. We're not going to go beyond that. We're not going to talk about Gaza. We're not going to, we could only talk about this kind of, box. We could only limit this box. And I think that has done a lot to hurt, Black and brown Democratic leadership, and I think we need a new reimagination of what Black and brown leadership looks like in this country. And we need to break out that box. And then we also need to look askance at all those Black and brown people, that have been supporting such nonsense. I think the biggest supporter of the Hispanic Congressional Caucus is AIPAC. The biggest supporter of the Black Congressional Caucus is AIPAC. The biggest supporter of the Asian caucus is AIPAC. You know what I mean? APAC is the lowest common denominator every time. And I think that, Espaillat, the Jasmine Crockett's of the world, the Cory Bookers, the Richie Torres, they have not done what they needed to do for us. You know what I mean?
Well, I think what you're saying in a way is that we need to be careful with identity politics, because identity can be used against us too. We can be given the rope a dope. We can be faked out by thinking that somebody, just because they look like us and sound like us, believe the things that we have the same values as us, and that's not always the case. One of the things that, and I bring that up because I know for a fact that, like, when Bernie Sanders was running for president, that traditional Democratic Party didn't want to give him any space to run. And now that we're seeing the Democratic Socialists winning in New York and in other places too, the
we have Ed on the line with us. Ed, how you doing, brother?
Hey, what's up?
How you doing, brother? Ed, I've never met you before, but I read your article, A Left Turn in Washington Heights, and I was just so blown away by how accurate and just you hit the nail on the head, brother, man. So thank you so much for doing that.
Well, thank you for inviting me on the show, and I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm going to share it. It's on your Substack. Folks can go to Substack to check out A Left Turn in Washington Heights, the DSA promise and limitations. But Ed, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. This has been what I would consider to be a historic election up here in Washington Heights. What was it that sort of that you felt made it important for you to weigh in with this article? Why did you weigh in?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, my semester's over, and I kind of wanted to write something on my Substack. So, this was definitely a seismic event in New York politics, and I've been following New York politics for a long time. I haven't been writing about it much lately, but I think in particular, some of the issues raised around the DSA are things that people have been talking about for a while, and really, it's something that I've been wanting to. I wanted to write a book about it. I still might do it, but this problem about opposing people's class interests to racial identity is really problematic, and I've been thinking about it for a while. And really, in a nutshell, like, I just think that the problem is that people just want to say it's one thing or another, right? It's this binary thing, and so the class issue is simply going to replace this idea of the gains made in social justice, organizing around people of color and other marginalized people's identity. And really what should be happening is that both things should be taken into account. I mean, also, I don't think that racial or marginalized identities should replace class issues. As you can see through the piece, I talk a lot about class issues.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, before we go on, I just want to make sure that the audience knows, who you are, Ed Morales. You're an author, you're a journalist. You wrote this Latinx, which we have here. You've been vocal in the community. You're an educator, and you're somebody who has been keeping
also wrote this more recently.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was more recent. You've been very very good at sort of parsing through all the noise out there. So I just want to make sure that I let the audience know about that. So
thank you, Octavio.
We were talking about that sort of difficulty with identity politics, right? Led, and how it was. It's been sort of we've got to be careful with identity politics because, like you say, Ed, it can be a binary, but it can be sort of like used against us.
Yeah. Look, I mean, this started during the first Trump election. I mean, obviously this struggle has been going on for a long time, but the more recent thing happened beginning in 2016 where, identity politics and the word woke began to come into use. And so the way that people from marginalized identities were trying to assert their rights and get rid of racism and sexism and homophobia. There's a book by this guy named Alofoke Taiwo, who is an academic. And he wrote about this thing called elite capture. And basically he said that, the elite corporations and elite politicians, they sort of captured this idea of people trying to liberate themselves through their identity and made it part of neoliberalism. And so that's why it's gotten so many attacks. And, there was like a lot of stuff between the Bernie bros and women who were supporting candidates of color. And, I found it, unfortunately, because I think those people should be allies. But, even, recently, I see people supporting this DSA victory on MSNBC by, talking about, or MS Now, I'm sorry, talking about, identity politics as being, part of this past politics, which was corrupted by the Democratic Party. And, I think it's problematic, and I think all along, really, there should be more of an alliance between marginalized people who use their identity to assert rights and people who are fighting for the working class. And I do think that marginalized people make up most of the working class. So I don't really know what people are talking about.
Yeah, Ed, one thing I really loved what you said earlier is that there were many reasons for this loss. I think AIPAC was definitely one, right? I think the mood has changed for Israel.
I like that. Tribe Called Quest.
Tribe Called Nix. That's right.
Yeah.
This is my brother.
It says Nix. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, Tribe Called Nix is my It's from Baka Pages and Tom Sanford has designed it.
Love it.
But what I like that you said, and there is a lot of, so I think AIPAC was one of them for sure. The mood for Israel has changed in this country. But I also like that you brought up, how dirty his campaign was. And how smear-filled and how ugly it was. As a Dominican, I was appalled that they brought like the dirty trench politics of the Dominican Republic here and actually like imported it, right? Like there was a moneyed effort to sully the waters with Dominican creators on the island, but some of those creators were actually imported, and you saw them on Dykeman and the Bronx spewing their nonsense, and I think it definitely had effect. Can you talk about the multi-prong of, reasons for the loss, but also that particular one, the anti-Haitianism, the anti-blackness?
Yeah, I'm not a diehard supporter of Adriano Espaillat, but I'm surprised that he allowed that to go on. I think that's an act of desperation on his part. And in a sense, like a lot of politics in the United States and other parts of the world come down to dirty stuff at the end when people get nervous. But, the issue of racism in Dominican Republic, I teach a course at John Jay called the Afro Latinx Experience in Latin America and the United States. And, it's a very thorny issue having a lot to do with what happened in the Americas going all the way back to the Haitian Revolution. And, unfortunately, you have this guy, Abinader, there, who, as I pointed out, is part of this new right-wing Latin American group that Trump put together. The common thread is this kind of racism and white supremacy. And, really, this is happening in a lot of countries now. In Colombia, they elected this guy, and a lot of the votes came from people who were radicalized in the United States by this right-wing white supremacist agenda. And that's a problem that a lot of Latino, not everybody, Latinx immigrants have, is that they bring this version of white supremacy to the U.S. and then now they're part of this voting. They're part of the voters that are being used to take out progressive leaders in Latin America. So, the issue in Dominican Republic is very particular, right? And it has its own nuances. And that was really terrible. But at the same time, when I did this report on Espaillat like about 10 years ago for City Limits, which I linked to, there were already these problems about Espaillat talking about how that should be a Latino district. And he sort of ignored the fact that some other Latinos actually voted for Rangel because some Puerto Ricans in the Bronx who identify with African Americans and felt that Rangel was doing a good job. I'm not like a big supporter of Rangel either, but this idea of using the Latino identity to marginalize Black votes, is problematic. And, Adriano already had leaned into that 10 years ago.
And he also lost the Black vote entirely this election because of the smears, I think.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, there may be other reasons. There may also be that Darializa did better outreach there, or the fact that, in general, African Americans vote more progressively than anybody in the United States.
Before you came on, me and Led were talking about the rise of Christianity in Latin America, and I wonder if that's something that you want to that you have followed or studied at all, and how that might be impacting sort of the right-wing movement, or the drift to the right wing in many of our Latin American nations.
Look, I'm not an expert on this, but, definitely going back to the 80s when they had problems with liberation theology, or the CIA did in Central America and other parts of Latin America. They decided to export a lot of Protestant, what do you call people who try to attract you into religion? I forget what the name is. Proselytizers, right.
Proselytizers, yeah.
Yeah. And so that has a very big impact in Latin America, evangelical Christianity. And again, I don't want to get into this thing about criticizing religions. The Catholicism in Latin America has long tended to, not, try to give people of color like some sort of support in return for being faithful to the religion, and but the Protestant evangelizing has more in common with the white supremacy that comes out of the United States. And I can't tell you like directly how that happens, but I'm not surprised if people have moved more to the right wing because of the increasing reach of evangelical Protestants in Latin America.
It's funny you say that, Ed, because we right before I was saying the same thing, I brought up liberation theology and how it really shook, the powers that be into action and to pushing, like this right wing religion on us. But I want to, like, again, I don't know. I hate to say this, but I'm just so happy to have you here, because it's like I read something that just blew my mind, and now I get to ask you about it. So please, I'm fanning out a little bit on you right now, because I just
Thank you.
Like, because it really struck, because what you find so much now is so much of the shit you read is just nonsense. It's written from part of the Democratic establishment, so it's always like sour grapes about who is she, what does she matter, right? And that's really fucking annoying. But one of the essential questions in that piece is, why have the Black and Latinx communities not produced the kind of alternative politics that we need, and why have our Black and brown politicians been the ringleaders of that? So give me some insight to that, please.
Well, look, there's a lot of different factors going on. Actually, my new book, if I want to just sneak in a little plug for that, but it's not going to come out until I have a new book that's coming out in September 2027, which is like a long time from now. But it's about the Nuyorican 70s, and I looked really closely at the young lords and the people who were involved in salsa and Nuyorican poetry. And so when I kind of like when I went into this period, it was almost like I was trying to live in the period. I just started watching like Kojak reruns and trying to go back into the 70s. But so the thing is, what I felt is that because of the COINTELPRO stuff that was going on with the FBI and people being infiltrated, and in general, the repression of the left movements in the late 60s and the early 70s, there was a tremendous amount of fear, in all of the communities. And I really felt like that the beginning of the identity politics, or the way people were trying to gain liberation through identity, really started right at the same time that the young lords were, being repressed and, driven into this terrible stuff, which I describe in the book. And I think what happened was that that and the fact that, with all the civil rights stuff, people forget that, the 70s, there was a recession, the 80s, a lot of people got marginalized. They talk about the 80s like there's booming money because of Trump and real estate, but, this was really like hip hop and people being really pushed to the margins. So the people that emerged from that, to do politics, I think they were rightfully afraid to really engage in radical politics, and they sort of established this rhythm or tendency where people got elected because they promised to do good stuff for the community, and they did do some good things for the community, but the politics became sort of frozen in this thing that really didn't challenge the status quo. And a lot of these political leaders got rewarded, by, as campaign donations became like a really bigger part of the electoral process. And they really started to believe that, it was necessary for them to continue to protect the community. And I think that the community responded to the fact that they saw people who looked like themselves in office. But the politics itself, just went down this road. And a lot of it has to do with, the money. And, I talked about some stuff, like for me, I followed closely the process of the creation of the PROMESA law and the Fiscal Oversight Management Board of Puerto Rico. And it was really disappointing to see how many Latino politicians and politicians of color just sort of let that whole process go through as if, there was no challenge to the validity of the debt, and that really kind of turned me off. And it particularly the role of Obama and just sort of like keeping his hands off of it. It sort of like really interrupted my previous writing career of covering politicians and taking them seriously, and I began to become really alienated from that. So I do think that a lot of people in our city, who represent Blacks and Latinos, they have a good heart and they really want to do some good, but the system is set up so that they can't really deviate too much from these really negative things. For example, like refusing to criticize what was going on in Palestine. I mean, there's so many Democratic politicians. Letitia James marched in the Israel parade the other day, and she's the one who did the whole lawsuit against Trump. So, we have this really weird situation now where, obviously, Trump, is horrendous and everything should be done to try to restrict his power. But then even people who are putting their lives on the line or their political careers on the line, I don't know, Letitia James must have gotten like 8 million, threatening phone calls, but they're also, not wanting to speak up, about what's going on in Palestine. So it's really difficult. I don't want to blanket condemn all Latino politicians, but, this is the result. And, and I do think that we've paid a price as a community because nobody's done anything to really stop this massive redistribution of wealth and this terrible foreign policy. Both parties really are complicit in this terrible foreign policy.
And Octavio, I just want to take a question. You keep going on that train of thought because you brought up Letitia James. She not only marched in that parade, I think she was like one of the official grand marshals of the parade. She marched with Bezalel Smotrich. She marched with actual war criminals, right? Like genocide committing people. Like, that's wild. But she was also one of the ones talking shit about Mamdani and what he did. And you know, before you got on, I also talked about breaking points, which I think if not mistaken, might have been Ryan Grimm, and he referred to what Mamdani did as bloodthirsty and cutthroat for not supporting Espaillat, which I think is bullshit. And I think that like what Mamdani did was show you how ineffective and cowardly and how feckless the Democratic establishment is. You know what I mean? And I want you to talk about the earthquake that occurred, right? He basically, Antonio Reynoso is gone, Espaillat is gone, right? Goldman is gone, and now we have three like bout it people in Congress, and that's an earthquake. And it's also a smack in the face for all these establishment politicians and to Letitia. And again, I've seen Tish James in action. She could speak. I had a lot of respect for Tish, but like, I think that they now see all of them in a different light. I call Cory Booker Cory Hooker, right? I call Jeffries AIPAC Shakur, right? Because they're doing the bidding of another nation. Talk about the Mamdani effect and the ripples is caused throughout the Democratic Party.
Well, it's not the first time that somebody got an endorsement from someone else and then refused to endorse, their protege or who they wanted. That's basically what politics can be about. I mean, sometimes people, do a hard about face, I think that Mamdani certainly stood for principles by saying I cannot support Espaillat because, or I'd rather support this candidate because she's stronger on the issues that I believe in. And Espaillat has had this track record, as I said, of just reproducing the status quo. And also, what else? Espaillat did not support Mamdani from the beginning as well, right? Is that true? I forgot.
Yeah, he spoke Cuomo. He supported Cuomo first, and then Mamdani afterwards. Yeah.
Right. He supported Cuomo. I mean, that's just an example of how people just play this political game. So I think that it was long overdue. This sort of thing happening, and I hope that the new candidates are able to be strong in Congress. I mean, there are more and more allies that they have, and I hope they don't. I hope they don't get in the position of like AOC, who like didn't even really come out during this race and plays this very calculated political game of endorsing, not endorsing. I don't really think this is a genocide. Wait, I did say it was a genocide. So I hope they're not forced into that. We'll see. I certainly maybe they're with strength in numbers. There can be more bold action taken. I mean, I guess AOC is in the position of there are just a few progressive women people in Congress, and now they're increasing, and maybe they can form a block to push certain types of legislation. And perhaps the damage that Trump is doing will allow Democrats to take over both houses of Congress, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I wanted to see, maybe I could also, because you've been you spent so much time looking at Latinx and Latino issues and Latino identity. It's something that me and Led have talked about a lot in the past, about the rightward shift of Latino, especially men, but not just men, in the United States. And I'm curious, as I walked around interviewing folks in Washington Heights, it was interesting to see how right wing a lot of the opinions were, and then in the in the aftermath, I guess I don't want to call it really an aftermath, but after the election, I started seeing a lot of people sort of like posting, all right, well, we're going to vote red in November. We just wait till there's a Republican in the district and we're going to like vote him in. And it's kind of like, whoa, what are you talking about? But what is your, in your analysis, like, can you determine why there's been such a sort of swing to the right from Latino men?
Well, the MAGA project is not only white supremacist, but it's male supremacist. And, that appeals to men who, feel, like they're marginalized in the society. It's been a classic problem for men of color, in the society where, going back to the 60s and those movements there, where, it's sort of like a reproduction of this hypermasculinity because they're marginalized. And so they think the only way out of it is to rely on this masculinity. And then the other thing, which is that the MAGA movement has successfully created this idea that there's some kind of rebellion going on from oppressed people, which is absurd because white men are not really oppressed. And even within our own communities, men are not oppressed. I mean, men, still run things. They expect women to agree with them all the time, and they're the leader of the family unit. But somehow, the MAGA movement, that's the genius of the MAGA movement, is that it creates this idea that people who aren't really oppressed and marginalized, are victims that have to fight back and they've lost something. And so, that could be a deadly combination with men of color, because men of color, are oppressed as men of color. And so they take that energy and say that they have to assert their masculinity, and they don't really see the whole political, all of the things that are going on politically. That's why when people talk about, that's another thing, this talking point about intersectionality is messed up, it's it's stupid, but really, I mean, people have to take into account, you may be oppressed in one way, you may have an advantage in another way. That's how you have to check your politics. You can't just say, well, I'm not white, so anything I do is right, or masculinity is our birthright because of our national culture. And then you have to realize that our national cultures also have a lot of problems. And that's why the right is winning in Latin America, because these national cultures that we come from haven't really checked themselves, on masculinity and white supremacy.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, right? Because I think it really does make sense that, that baggage we bring from our own colonial past, showing up in our politics here. But as a person that has a long history of looking at this, where do you think it's gonna lead? Where will we be 5-10 years from now with this?
You mean with the everything, or
yeah, with the kind of this.
Yeah.
So for example, that smear campaign, right? That's causing a rupture with Black Americans and Dominicans. Some Dominicans say, "Hey, I'm going to go Republican now," because where does all this lead?
Well, look, I think that it's already been shown that politics can turn on material conditions, and right now, where we're headed for is more, increase of wealth inequality, and more people being pushed to the edge. They don't know what they're going to do. All these people got thrown out of health insurance, people getting thrown out of SNAP. Where is that energy going to go? It gets to a point where, when people are probably going to begin to see the contradiction that this MAGA thing is actually the vehicle that is, pushing them to the margins. Now, I don't know what people are going to do with that energy. It could be a positive political energy. It could be a negative nihilistic energy. I hope not, but I think that, it's possible that there's a lot of stuff being pushed to the edge now with this presidency. It's really going nowhere ideologically. And then also people are also seeing the contradictions of a lot of the liberal leaders who have been ineffectual and are also really just trying to protect their piece of the pie. So, I think that there will be a breaking point, probably within the next 5 years, but I'm not sure which direction it's going to go in.
Yeah, and I think as the nation sees and looks at maybe New York as sort of an example, maybe they'll start to align themselves with this farther left movement. I've already seen Bernie Sanders out on social media talking about freezing the rent, pointing to New York City and saying we're going to freeze the rent in Michigan, we're going to freeze the rent in Colorado, we're going to freeze, because it's not just New York that's dealing with like a housing crisis and exorbitant rents, it's other places. And so I think that as do you agree that as New York continues to effectively enact some of these promises, that other places may start to say, it's possible. And if you can do it in New York, one of the most expensive places in the country, maybe it can be done here as well.
I mean, yeah, sure. I think it's very possible that there's a widespread movement for in that particular issue. The problem is that even frozen, I mean, the rent's still too high,
Yeah.
and there have to be a lot of different things to happen to help people to re-employ themselves, fight off the AI threat. And also, we have the the climate change is really a big problem. A lot of these problems are widespread around the world. I just saw a video today of like people having like a mini riot in Malaga, Spain, because of the the housing policies in Spain, which is actually a very progressive government, are like much worse than they are here. I mean, you can be evicted in 5 seconds in Spain. They have no mercy. So there has to be a lot of work done. I mean, these things like rent control and reestablishing people's ability to get government subsidies for healthcare and housing and other things are good, but we have a long way to go. I mean, there's a lot of things, a lot of ways that we have to be able to recover. The huge problem is there's way too much money in too few hands, and they're controlling the agenda all over the world. And it's just really, it's deadly. I mean, we don't really see like the deadly consequences that's happening in a lot of different parts of the world.
And I was talking to Octavio. He kind of gave me like he shook me up a little bit because I had not thought of it. He said to me, "What if Adriano still runs in November like Cuomo did? Do you think that's a possibility, or is just we should forget about that?"
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him, but I don't think it's a smart move. I don't think he'll have much more luck than Cuomo, although he wasn't weighed down by like a major sex harassment scandal. I mean, I just think it would be very divisive. I mean, hopefully other Democratic figures would convince him not to do it, because I think it would cause a lot of problems within the party.
Good, Octavio.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I wanted to respect your time, Ed. I want to make sure that you get some more time to plug your book. So tell us a little bit about what you've got coming up, and what, if you have any like final words for.
I have one more question for him though. We can't let him go that fast.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay.
One last question, Ed. One last question for me is, one thing I've said on the show repeatedly is that the notion of vote blue, no matter who, is dead. I think it's vote blue, but it really matters who. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that in New York, we're in a position where, we have this is what happened, like in the primaries, we have a chance to change what's going on a little bit in the Democratic Party. As far as the national elections, I don't want to be that guy, but, New York always votes for Democrats. So it's really, if you're going to say, well, I'm going to hold my breath and vote for the Democratic candidate, they're probably going to win anyway. It's not like, all these people felt guilty after Trump beat Clinton for the first time, but Clinton was never going to lose in New York. So, Clinton won New York. So, it's not, I don't think that voting Democrat in New York on a national basis is that crucial. Unfortunately, the way the political system is set up, it's the swing states, where there's really a problem. But from what you say, I do think it's important to try to change what's going on in the Democratic Party. But, that can be very difficult because of the political action committees and the huge amount of money that's in politics. And that's the reason why, the main reason why some of these politicians behave in certain behaviors. Like 30 years ago, it was all real estate in New York, and I wrote this article about Espaillat taking real estate money. Now there's all these other issues like, the way that AIPAC is controlling things. And also the tech companies have a huge lobby. So that's a problem. As far as my my next book, I just want to say that I'm really excited about it because it really tried, I don't know if you read the Joanna Fernandez book on the Young Lords. That's a great book. I consulted with it a lot, and I have interviewed most of the people in the Young Lords. But I think what's unique about this book is that it really talks about the human stories behind people in the Young Lords, people in the salsa, the stars of salsa, the origins of the Nuyorican Cafe, and try to tell the stories of their lives and the struggles that they went through. And also the way that New York Puerto Ricans took part in the counterculture in the 70s, because a lot of people have this idea that the counterculture was just this white thing, and a lot of Blacks and Latinos took part in the counterculture and had a big effect on the counterculture. And there was actually a lot of attempts of alliances between white radicals and Black and Latinx radicals that we could learn from now, because I think that there's still a really big gap. Back then the white radicals really, they thought, wow, we should really pay attention to these people because they're part of what we're talking about. There was a big failure there, which I talk about in the book. But I think that we've taken some step backwards in that regard. And as I said, I just really there's so much about American history which is focused on the white mainstream, and Nuyoricans in particular played a huge part in the countercultural movement and really kind of pushed it forward in the 70s. And so that's what I talk about in the book.
Ed, I just want to say, man, I hope we can have you on regularly, man, because I'm blown away by your take on these things. But can you share, the social, your URLs, where people could find you at? Because I had a hard time finding that article. I only saw it on Facebook. So please tell people where they could get access to your amazing content.
A lot of my journalistic work is collected at edmorales.net, but I haven't been updating it lately. But it has stuff like that I had written for the Times. I've written like music pieces for the Times a lot and did a lot of book reviews for The Nation. And it is also, I have posted a lot of the stuff that I wrote for the Village Voice in the 90s in there. I'm thinking about Instagram, but I've been very slow to get there. I do have a X account. It's at Spanglish Kid. And that's most of on social media. That's where I'm active. Yeah.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I also wanted to say, now that you were mentioning it before we go, I've been blown away by the importance of poetry within the Puerto Rican political movement, and how poetry, isn't just, just the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. The Nuyorican Poets Cafe is kind of an incubator, or has been an incubator, for broader political thought and political action. And that's something that only recently have I, because I have not been as intimately involved with the movement. It's only recently that it's sort of like added up in my brain. So I thank you for your work in sort of expanding and letting people learn about that. I can't wait to read your book, and I'll make sure to be reading more, and also the importance of the arts, music, and poetry, and like Led likes to say, everything is political. So I think we need to remember that as much as we try to distance art from politics and politics from art, we need to make sure that we understand that, sure, even even apolitical thought is a political thought.
Yeah, well, I think the separation between art and politics really comes out of the Western European tradition, and I think that marginalized people in the United States and people in Latin America and Africa and I guess Asia, the just the expression of the identity is a political act, because the identity that's imposed on us in the West is, pro white and pro capitalist and patriarchal. So, where there's different ideas about race and gender roles and mixing of languages in different parts of the world. So it becomes a political statement. The Nuyorican poets, by just creating this bilingual poetry, which I was really inspired by, because I was a poet at the New York Poets Cafe in the 90s. That was revolutionary for me. The idea of just not just the idea that a mixture of languages could have power, and translation has power. This is then this becomes a political thing. And so I do talk a lot about what they tried to do. Like Miguel Algarin has a great, he did an intro to this collection that Pablo Neruda did that was translated in the 70s. And it's a really political essay. People should check it out. It's kind of a rare book. It's one of the things that I consulted when I was doing this book. And there's a lot of different things that happen with the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. A lot of people accuse it of being not political enough, but there was so much debate going on at that time, and it's fascinating, and so that's what I try to put in this book.
Well said, Ed. Thank you so much for being on the show. Hopefully having you back soon, and I'm looking forward to your new books, and I want to go back and read all your stuff because I'm very impressed with you, sir. Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me on. I'm happy that you're interested.
All right, thank you. And
it seems like a great show you got here.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Yeah. We're trying, and I want to encourage all of our viewers to do what you can. Please contribute to the relief efforts in Venezuela. We shared a bunch of those places where you could contribute at the top of the show. It's very important. The people of Venezuela are really, really suffering. So please do your part. Spread love is the Uptown way, right, Led?
Yes, sir. Before we go, I also want to say tomorrow is June 29th is the Uptown Stroll closing concert. It's going to be at Jackie Robinson Park in the band shell, and we're going to have performances by Reggie Wins. And again, the Uptown Stroll, Noma, super important to Uptown. So make sure you're there for the closing reception. All right, thank you. Spread love is the Uptown way. Support the page, subscribe, tell your people about it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
Bye.